Hello, friends. On this glorious day in drink history, we celebrate San Francisco. San Francisco is where I currently call home, living alongside the hippies and Haight-Ashbury, and it's where we've been broadcasting from thus far at Acre headquarters on Potrero Hill. But later today, that changes, folks, as I hit the road to take this broadcast on tour for the very first time. Heading first to the Hollywood Hills of Los Angeles, and then fear and loathing my way across the desert to Las Vegas. Nothing can go wrong. At least not today, because I'm still here in the comfy confines of our studio in the city by the bay. Additionally, I'd like to wish a big congratulations to 5 distilleries in the Acre Distilling portfolio for receiving chairman's trophies in the 2016 Ultimate Spirits Challenge this week, with top honors going to Vaux Pontarlier in the absinthe category, Tempest Fugit Grand Classico in the bitter Amaro and aperitif category, Christian Druin XO in the Calvados category, Westland Whiskey in the American Single Malt category, and Cavalon X Bourbon Oak Single Malt in the World Whiskey category. Well done. Let's do this. This episode of the Educational Drinking Show is sponsored by Junipero Gin, which is the original American craft gin going back to 1996 and the pioneering work of Fritz Maytag, which also makes it the gin of San Francisco. At 98.6 proof, it's a bit stronger than most gins and perfect in your favorite gin cocktail. Good stuff. My guest today is Duggan McDonnell. You might know Mr. McDonnell from his work as bartender proprietor of the legendary Cantina bar in San Francisco, or as the co-founder of Campo de Encanto Pisco. But today we are talking about Duggan's spectacular book, Drinking the Devil's Acre, a love letter from San Francisco and her cocktails, which, as you might guess, is all about San Francisco and her cocktails, which is kind of a big deal for us here at Acre Distilling Company because San Francisco is a part of our DNA. It's our home. It's our tribe, and it's our history. And Mr. McDonnell has done this fine city proud with this exceptional book, reminding anyone who might be unaware of San Francisco's place in the pantheon of great cocktail cities around the world. Praise for Drinking the Devil's Acre has been strong, with Wayne Curtis of the Wall Street Journal saying it is his nominee for Best Cocktail Book of the Year, and Ernest Beale of the San Francisco Chronicle saying, McDonnell's book is an impassioned and hyperbolic account of what San Franciscans drank in her earliest days and what they drink today in craft cocktail lounges. Hailing from right here in San Francisco, USA, it is my great pleasure to share with you my conversation with Duggan McDonnell.
Can I get a hallelujah?
You most certainly can. How long have you been a bartender in San Francisco?
God. How are we defining bartender, folks? Come on.
Dealer's choice.
Yeah. How long? You know, I first stepped behind the stick at Mecca, which is a restaurant that's has been shuttered for a few years now. But I think I stepped behind the stick there in November of 2002.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Our top-selling drink was a Bloody Bellini. Do you want to know what's in a Bloody Bellini?
So bad. Can you get a little bit closer to the mic? Whoa. You really committed to that?
Okay, so the Bloody Bellini, ready?
Yeah.
So you know how it's sort of retro, trendy, and badass to have a slushy machine behind your bar?
Totally.
Okay, so we had this massive thing that was a Bellini machine. And it was, peach funk and terrible vodka or peach liqueur and some kind of Prosecco. And you go like this, and it would, in this lovely martini glass, of course, as we called it, you would have this pink slushy would come out, and they were like $6. But to make it even better for that crowd in the Castro back then, we would put a single shot of Chambord atop.
Whoa.
So a Bloody Bellini was this slushy Bellini with a float of Chambord. And in 2002, we crushed.
You're probably just slinging those, weren't you?
God. Well, we would bust it, and then the poor barbacks would have to refill it with, another 6-gallon bucket. Well, so, and by the way, the day of the week that this was the most popular was Sundays, which was the drag show. Sunday afternoons, like at 3 o'clock. And so I would be in there slinging, lemon drops and Cosmos and nonsense and obviously bloody Bellinis on Sunday afternoons. And these poor so we'd go through like 100 or 200 bloody Bellinis, right?
Yeah.
Just sending them out. But the poor barbacks, for some reason, you couldn't pre-chill or pre-freeze the mix. So then we dump it in. We're like, go. We need Bellinis. And then they would just come out and they wouldn't be slushy, right? So you actually had to take off 45 minutes. And that was the thing with the bloody Bellinis is you never actually wanted to run out in the midst of a shift because you just might as well say we're out.
Whoa.
It was one of those things. But it was my favorite thing. And to this day, I haven't ever worked in another bar that's had a slushy machine. I see them around now.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to work behind a bar where I can go like this. Maybe that's the cocktails on draft thing.
Yeah.
But not as retarded. Can I say that? Sorry, Donald Trump can say it. I can't. Shouldn't.
We're finding
Forgive
the boundaries as we go.
Okay.
You wrote a book about
true.
San Francisco.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for this book originally start?
Well, buddy, sheesh. So, where and when, kind of, right? Might be the way to think about that. So it's 2016.
Mm-hmm.
We just said. So I started slinging drinks here in 2002. Previously, was living up in Seattle for a little while. Came back home to California, and the ideas for drinking the Devil's Acre, I think, really started in 2007, maybe 2006 actually. Prior to opening up Cantina, there was this intersection of my planning, desiring to be a saloon keeper, an operator here in San Francisco, and I wanted to learn well the stories of previous great saloon keepers and what they did, so that then I could, embody some of that or share some of those tales across the wood. And that was it. But simultaneously, during those same years, I was in grad school, the writing program at USF, and I was so busy and so drunk all the time that I found myself writing a lot about what I was doing every day.
Uh-huh.
And that had a lot to do with booze and working and the changing of the guard and the changing of craft cocktail culture now 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of those passages actually, some of that early writing does show up in Drinking the Devil's Acre.
What about San Francisco cocktail history do you think makes it worthy of its own book?
Because there's no other city in the world like it.
How so?
That's it, bar none, full stop. This city is just dramatic and exciting in so many ways. Like, this city is innovation in so many sectors, and not just the culinary sector, right, of food and drink and winemaking and craft distilling and brewing. It's innovation because of this damn thing. It's innovation because of so many other things, right? What my research revealed to me was that this place, San Francisco, became the culinary epicenter of the West, if not of the United States, in the late 19th century. And that is because that's the original kind of farm-to-table movement. Everything, all the farmers market that are currently here, the previous iterations happened in the 19th century. And San Francisco, because it was the richest, fastest-growing city in the history of the world, got everything it wanted. So A, it's this port city that gets all these amazing things coming into the port. And B, it's so very close to the Livermore and the San Joaquin Valleys and the Napa Valley and the Sonoma Valley and Watsonville, where all this produce is grown. So imagine smashing that together in the richest city in the world. You have access to everything. So food and drink, no problem. Okay? So we have all, and that's a very sophisticated palate, by the way, when you have exposure to all the great things of the world, and they're fucking fresh and amazing. I thought, okay, I didn't just grow up with this. This isn't just happening now, say in the early 21st century, and we're all spoiled. No, we've actually always been spoiled. Uh-huh. That's what I really discovered there. When it comes to food and drink and the production of it and the flavors present here, it's always been that way since day one. And I thought, my God, I need to write about that. And we haven't even talked about cocktails yet, Alan. Mm-hmm. So you imagine that which follows is the cocktail is that intersection of drink and plate, of spirit, of wine, of fresh produce, of something that came in a barrel from Bordeaux, but also something that was distilled or fermented just a few miles away. And I believe that is quintessentially Californian, and certainly that which is quintessentially Californian always originates in San Francisco, is that we are bringing the best of the world together with our unique, fresh stamp upon it.
So you started bartending in San Francisco in 2002. What did your bartending journey look like after that, kind of setting up your journey to lead you to write this book?
Well, I had been, slinging drinks and working in beverage for years before up in Seattle after finishing college, and writing as well. And it was just a ad hoc clusterfuck hodgepodge of stuff coming together, right? It didn't really crystallize until I would say 2011, 2012, frankly, is when I thought, okay, I have a title. I began to put a structure around it. I began to say, okay, here's what I want to honor. Here's the stories that I want to tell, and I want to create this bridge. I want this book to speak not only to the past, as I just did, but to also be really, really relevant to right now, to what is happening right now, not just in this community, but globally, because a lot of similar trends, frankly, and history is to be found in New Orleans, London, New York, Paris, perhaps Havana, perhaps other cities as well around the world, that have this great drinking history, and that also their great drinking history is tied to the character of that city, that place. We know that about folks in New Orleans, right? And certainly that's true about San Francisco, is that the things that we put in our mouth, and not just the foods, but the drinks, often define who we are. They are part and parcel to our culture, to frankly the soul of our city. And I wanted to dive into that, and whatever came about, came about. But that's where I started going, and I determined that, say, in 2011, was able to really write it. And I wrote the bulk of it in 2012 and 13, and that's when I did the deal with Chronicle, and then here we are. It finally came out in 2015, and we're talking about it, now 6 months down the road. Somebody's read it, I hear.
Yeah.
I've heard that somebody has read it, and it's not just me.
Well, it's a really beautiful book. I mean,
Thank you.
The writing's incredible, the photography, and it has this very kind of collaborative feel. It was very inclusive of the San Francisco bartending scene. Can you talk about your approach to that?
Yeah, I think that collaboration is key. The more eyes you have on a creative project, hopefully the better it's going to be. Obviously, writing it was important for me to sort of suffuse every chapter with my narrative voice, and I worked with the editors at Chronicle to get there. But the actual content, that need not all be mine. For instance, look, this is a book about cocktails, and the great majority of all the recipes of specific cocktails are not my own. They're coming from the community. And whether that cocktail, again, was specifically created in this community, a la the Pisco Punch or the Mai Tai, that need not matter. What does matter is that, like, say, the Negroni has been heartily embraced here and was first embraced in the United States in San Francisco. So who and how and at what restaurants have long stirred these great Negronis around San Francisco? That was important, where a Mai Tai is being made now, to a sublime degree in San Francisco. That was important for me to share, right? And of course, Smuggler's Cove comes to mind, but there's other places that are doing an amazing job. Bar Agricole, killer Mai Tai, by the way, right? There's many, many places out there that are doing great renditions of drinks, both locally created and locally celebrated, and that gets to the core of who we are as a community of bartenders. To write a book about a city, you have to have the whole city involved, and there's even folks, recipes in here for both, drinks and syrups and other ideas that are actually coming from bartenders who used to tend bar here, who are now, say, in Portland running programs or in New York running programs. But their ideas of how they cut their teeth, not unlike both Jerry Thomas and Harry Johnson, was here in San Francisco.
What's that like? I mean, you already said that you think this is one of the great culinary and drink cities in the world of all time. And to write a book that tries to encapsulate that and articulate that, and not only do it on your own, but do it in collaboration with so many talented bartenders. When this thing really got its legs and started coming together, what was that like for you?
Well, working with bartenders will always be like herding cats.
So it was challenging.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And, look, writing some chapters was easier than others. and that's just how it is. And sometimes the content comes, sometimes not. And I just needed it to be representative. I needed to touch on as many different aspects. It was more important for me to, frankly, offer a portrait of San Francisco first, rather than, take a deep dive into the greatest amount of culinary expertise I could offer. But if I showcase the best of San Francisco and what's happening here now and what I've been doing, this decade plus in the city now, that a lot of, culinary light bulbs might actually go off. Almost everyone was actually very cooperative in sharing recipes. And look, a little secret is, if it's published online or it's on a menu, you don't actually have to ask someone's permission. So if they didn't get back to me, but if everyone else said you need to use Alan's Eggs Benedict recipe,
obviously,
then I would use it, and that's how I did it. And then after the fact, I'm like, hey, by the way, you didn't get back to me, but I still use your recipe, Drake, because I think it's so fantastic. But also, even if I thought it was terrible, if something is evocative of this community, then it deserves to be in the book. So, is that a new classic? Perhaps, but a regional classic, and a regional classic again offers a piece of that portrait of this place.
It's as pretty aesthetically as any cocktail book out there. Can you talk about that side of the project?
There's a lot of plastic surgery.
Yeah.
No. One of the things that you and I have talked about and shared over the years, Alan, is our appreciation for history, but also that history needs to be, relevant and put to use. So I don't want it to be dusty, right? So there's a lot of photography in this book, but also the typeset is small and unique. And I think that's important. So if we talk about the photography, the great majority of the photography in the book is actually archival and has been sourced. And I found it through multiple libraries, both public and private, here in Northern California, and specifically the one right near Civic Center in San Francisco. And then the new photography it's in color versus the archival photography is all in black and white. And the new stuff is in color, and yet there's a grainy movement to it. If we were to, flip to some of the pages here, and you might see, for instance, there's this blood and sand, right? So it was really important for me, like I said, to show movement, right? It's being poured. And one of the things that I just don't like about cocktails and books or magazine, where it's just static and stagnant and just sitting there. And I thought, oh, there's another lemon drop. Really? Do I need to see another lemon drop? No. Does the world need to see really another, referential image of a blood and sand? Particularly, not really. So why couldn't we offer something where it looks a little bit alive, a little luminescent, and frankly a little dreamy? So we can't really place a now timestamp upon it. Might have been taken 5 years ago. It might be in the future. It is that thing. So it's living. And I think that also speaks to the nature and the subject of this book, is that I hope that it continues to have life and to be relevant. So it speaks to the past. It is reaching back, but it's also offering something to the future. And look, if you put together something pretty, and my God, Chronicle Books did an amazing job in putting this together. Hopefully something pretty will sit on shelves in bookstores longer and continue to be pulled off, and then will continue to be part of conversations like this in the years to come.
Can you talk me through one of the historical photos in here that inspires you in terms of helping tell the story?
Sure. I think that if we kind of flip to the beginning, one of the things that I love is this open up shot right here. Here we go. So this
and for folks listening on audio, kind of talk us through the shot.
So here we are. We're on Pacific Avenue, a.k.a. Terrific Street, because it was such a damn good time. Okay, the date on this says 1909. Now, what's interesting is there was the Great Quake and Fire of 06. So this is all new. For the most part, these are new buildings recently resurrected. So imagine if your city burned, and then immediately when it was resurrected, all of the craziest, perhaps wildest, most disgusting nightclubs in the world were immediately built back up because the city could not survive without its good time. And that's what was going on Pacific Avenue. Where the gay 90s took place was on this street, but in the prior decade, or 15 years before, and that was frankly San Francisco at its height. And so that's Pacific Avenue, and look, it's just chock-a-block with nightclubs. Every single business is a different nightclub. We've got the Hippodrome, we got Spider Kelly's, we've got one called the Bear. Do you know why it's called the Bear?
Tell me.
So back in the old days on Pacific, right? And Pacific was actually a dirt road that lent itself into a pier that that went out into the port where the ships would dock at, and then you would just literally get off on the pier and come up Pacific, right? And it was just action right then and there. Well, there was one saloon that was reported to have a bear, a grizzly bear, chained into the middle of the saloon that would engage in drinking contests with men. So you and
Man, I was hoping that was the answer.
So you and I would go into the saloon, and the bear would get a glass of milk punch, and you and I would get a glass of milk punch, and we'd chug, and we would keep putting our glasses back down. And what happened? I guess the bear had a pretty high tolerance, because the bear would outdrink most of the men in the old Barbary Coast. And so this is 40, 50 years later, and they named their saloon after the old one.
Why hasn't anyone brought that back?
Because we suck and we're stupid. You mean the naming your bar the saloon, or actually having a grizzly bear?
Having the
chain?
bear. I mean, Kickstarter.
So
Let's do this.
At the Litquake launch of Drinking the Devil's Acre last October, we actually had a guy, you know him, John from ABV.
Yeah.
John dressed up in a bear outfit.
Of course he did.
And there was bear wrestling and drinking and all that sort of stuff. So we revived some of that culture just a little bit.
Awesome. Can you tell me about, beverage, cocktail spirits aside, just your approach to writing this book and what you're trying to accomplish through the creative decisions that you made?
That's an interesting question. My approach to writing it.
I felt like you took a really creative approach in trying to create a narrative. And there's a very obvious way to write a cocktail book, and that is, slap together a bunch of recipes. But I felt like you took a very inspired, deliberate approach to how you put this together as a writer.
Well, thanks for that. I'm glad someone thinks it's deliberate, not just haphazard. Alan, I'm a trained novelist, and so writing long-form fiction is what I understand. That beginning, middle, and end, that sort of 5-act structure, and weaving the narrative threads in the beginning, and middle, and end again. And this book, it can be read taking apart chapters by chapters, here, and here, and here, because that's often how people approach books with recipes, right? They're like, basil gimlet, I want to read about that. It's fucking chapter 24, people. Go back to the beginning and read the preface first, and then go 1, 2, 3. And the reason why I say that is because chapter 24 does rely upon information that came in 19, 17, 15, and the middle essays, because everything builds upon the next, right? It does come to this crescendo, okay, with chapters 25, and then it sort of has this lovely little denouement at the end, where it sort of falls out at the end. And that was important to me. It was important to give the reader a journey. And then I think that I was just arrogant enough to think that if you were to read through Drinking the Devil's Acre twice, you would catch things again on that repeat reading, again and again. So every time you do go back to it and you're flipping again through its narrative, hopefully there's an additional reward. So peeling away that layer, if you will. And I think that's really important to me. And any sort of work that's going to, stand not only up on its own 2 feet, but also stand the test of time, I think needs to offer that. And this was my first book. What I've spent the great majority of my hours of my adult life doing is either making a drink for somebody else or drinking one myself. So I would have been a fool to ignore that and not write about it. And I thought, okay, if this thing is going to be around in a decade or 3, it needs to offer a lot of layers of experience to that. And so, you mentioned creativity, and I say I thank you for that. I think I kept structure in mind quite a bit. I think it was important for me to keep structure and be referential. And so there's people in here, there's certain bartenders, like, what they would do is like they get the book and then they'd flip to the back right away to see where their names were. And you'll see like multiple names. Well, because there's multiple connections with David Nepov, Mr. Mojito, and even Carrie Cormican, formerly of Comstock Saloon. There's multiple references because she made multiple drinks or she had an aside one time and I added that in. I mean, there's little bits and morsels in there that add up to something larger. And it was important for me to do that. And then again, that goes back to my desire to showcase the whole community. That this is my personal experience of the whole community and many of the people who've been doing great work in it for all these years.
What are some of the cocktail books out there that inspire you?
Next question.
Really? There's none?
Yeah, I really. Sorry, all colleagues. Sorry. There is not a single cocktail book that inspires me.
Well, why don't you just write your own, man?
Dude.
So
creative nonfiction is really what inspired me here. So travel books.
Yeah.
I read a lot of travel prose.
Uh-huh.
So, and look, this is culinary travel, creative nonfiction, right? So where it's actually doing really well are people coming to San Francisco and visiting it and taking it back.
Mm-hmm.
Because it acts as guidebook to experiencing the city.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's your first time or what have you, you can actually soak up a piece of the city. And that, in part, was part of why I wrote it, was I wrote it for people coming here. And it's called A Love Letter from San Francisco and Her Cocktails. So the place comes before. San Francisco is above cocktails. Mm-hmm. And again, so my effort to write about the city and offer a portrait or even a map of the city via drinking is what I wanted to do. I don't think... Yeah, I'm actually remiss. I haven't really bought a cocktail book, any books lately.
Mm-hmm. I
just pre-ordered our buddy Dan Dunn's American Wino. It hasn't come out yet, so it could suck, Dan. It could totally suck. Plug. But, he helped me out with my book launch down in L.A., and I'm really excited for that because that is also boozy creative nonfiction, and that's what I like.
He's amazing.
He's a total retard, and I love him for it.
He's going to be on this podcast.
Well, we need to go to his launch together.
When's that?
It's actually like in a month from now. He's coming up here and doing an event.
Wow.
Let's text him and find out.
We should.
So that's what I'm really, really interested in is as I like the connection between eat and drink and creative nonfiction. So look, is that Bourdain? Sure. I think that not enough people have done great writing about spirits and cocktails in the way that, say, chefs have, like Blood, Bones, and Butter.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Great book. And there's many other things. I mean, my bookshelves are lousy with MFK Fisher and Ruth Reichel. And so within that subset of the genre, I've read a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, you go back to being a young man in your 20s. So long ago. All that macho shit that we read, Alan.
Yeah.
All the Hemingway, the Kerouac, all the adventure, all guys going out and doing stuff and putting booze in their mouths.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is me going from place to place and putting booze in my mouths, but doing it with structured culinary expertise.
Where's the Hunter S. Thompson shout out?
Man, if I could remember who that is. Hunter, man, he's just a ton of fun. I think that the next book, of which we won't go any further on, but there's gonna employ some of that because he moves at the speed of light, and that's what's profound about his work. And this book, every chapter has a specific pace. It hits certain points within it, and then you introduce people to an idea, the drink, the place, where it is. Here's the experience of it. Here's how it's good, and then here's how you make it, right? I.e. the recipe, and that's how you end with. So every chapter is kind of similar. So, but then in between, I do have bookending, personal essays, little bits of memoir, and then the middle is that bridge between amongst the 25, right? That has that as well. And that's when I'm allowed to get lucid in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And, working hard, drinking behind the stick, all that sorts of stuff, and time flying. I'd like to see how that goes together in the next one.
What surprised you? I mean, this book was a long time coming, and you spent a lot of time developing it. But when you really dug into it, what did you learn about San Francisco and your relationship with it through the experience of writing this book?
You know, I learned that Herbert Asbury was a knucklehead. And that, like, he came here for 60 days and then wrote this book called The Barbary Coast, which then everyone takes to be what early San Francisco was like. And frankly, that was like one man who was like obsessed with like the gutter of life. His like titillating portrayal of one tiny aspect of a city. And that if you look at books that were written by folks who actually lived here and were natives or came and lived for a while, there's nothing else like that in the canon of San Francisco literature. So Asbury is actually the outlier. So I throw that out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the through line is this like celebration of joy and this seeking of possibility. Okay? And then always eating that which is fresh. And then there was always boats coming into the port, and they were popping champagne and ports and Bordeaux's and Piscos and all this amazing shit. And I was like, oh my God, what a great time. And it went on for decades. And that's what was exciting. And once you have all those things together, well, what's the logical conclusion? Cocktails. You're going to mix it together. You know? People were probably putting oysters in cocktails. We don't even know about it. I mean, they were just doing it. Because this is the place where this smashing up of fusion was happening. And that happened politically. It happened racially, right? It happened religiously. And of course it happened in the kitchen and in the saloon. Mm-hmm. And it's that sort of smash up and where all this robust ideas came for us. That was really just exciting. You know, we really are the youngest, largest city in the United States, but it still has so much history and so much it has so much history, right? But then it also has this wonderful aspect of innovation. And so I'm quite proud, you know, to be here.
Can you tell me about the title?
Why the title? Sure. So the title of the book is Drinking the Devil's Acre. And, you know, I was just talking about the Barbary Coast. And the one thing that I may give back to Asbury then, that prick, I hope you're rolling, Herbert, is that Herbert sourced a book, but I believe Charles Knox was the author. I don't remember all my old authors right now, but they were referencing the northeastern corner of the Barbary Coast. And it was this little pizza slice of land, triangle, if you will. Montgomery, Kearny, Broadway. And if you went on the Kearny side, it's where you didn't want to go. It's where you might get stabbed, right? It's where you might go see a sex show with a goat. It's where any and all things were possible except a good drink. Okay? It was so the Barbary Coast was the wickedest, wildest place in the whole damn world. Well, the Devil's Acre was it literally was hell on earth, or for some, Alan, it was heaven, because it offered all these escapes, all this sin was there in full display. Okay? Now, just 2 blocks away was the largest and most resplendent saloon in Western America with the most expensive drinks in all of the United States, the Bank Exchange Saloon, 2 blocks away. Okay, so not unlike major cities now, and certainly like San Francisco, in 2 blocks the whole culture can change. I started studying what happened down on Lower Montgomery Street, and there were all these, you know, marbled cocktail palaces, and they tried so hard to separate themselves from what was the Barbary Coast. And the worst of the Barbary Coast was the Devil's Acre. So I started thinking about this, that it had not been for all those sins that were happening, you know, Mickey Fins type sins, you know, opium and deaths and all this crazy shit that was happening in the Devil's Acre, the salvation, shaken and stirred down on Montgomery Street, would not have happened. That had it not been for the Devil's Acre, the high art of the culinary craft cocktail would not have been born in San Francisco. So I tip my hat to that old gross place called the Devil's Acre. And so it's a bit of a pun or whatever. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. But drinking the Devil's Acre, you actually never went there to drink. And so that's the tell. Or it's not a tell. It gets you into the book, and then you realize, aha, there's actually nothing there. Everything was around it. Mm-hmm. But I do think that those old barkeeps, you know, you would go there and you would tour. There literally were walking tours of the Barbary Coast then. You could actually peer into all the sinful holes, and then you would leave and you'd come back up on Montgomery Street, and you'd actually have like a proper sophisticated cocktail. And that's where everyone went after they did the Barbary Coast. They went and they had their lovely expensive drinks. So, hey, why not? The grass was greener down on Montgomery Street, and that was all due in part to the Devil's Acre. So,
expanding on this idea
terrible
of the seedy underbelly of San Francisco's history, can you tell me about this saying of getting shanghaied?
Oh gosh, sure. I mean, that was a guy last name Kelly, and gosh, so I think he was like 4'8" or 5'2" or something terrible, and he had this this Irishman with his terrible temper. Obviously, he was high on his own supply. Obviously, he'd been dropped on his head as a child, and he was probably, number 6 of 8, and his mother never loved him. Maybe he never tasted mother's milk. Well, anyway, Kelly opened up, a saloon on Pacific Avenue, which we already talked about, right? Before it was called Terrific Street. And, the guy just had no soul, and miners would literally get off the boat and look for short-term work, or they'd blow off some steam or what have you. And he was in the business of slavery, right? That's what it was. And so he would offer them a Mickey Finn, which was, not even real whiskey, right? It's just brown stuff with maybe some chili powder in it, gunpowder, opium, whatever else, he could get his hands on. And that was the house shot, if you will. And he would say, cheers, welcome to San Francisco, you knucklehead. And, of course, he wasn't drinking the same thing. It just looked the same. And the guys would go back and, what's it called when you get roofied, right? And except you weren't really looking for it, And damn, it's the only time I have a good time, And so all these poor bastards were getting roofied. Well, it wasn't just that, Kelly had a trap door, okay? So he would push them down a trap door once they passed out. He would hit them over the head, throw them down the trap door, and then they would go down to the basement and lug the bodies out in a wheelbarrow. And then, as I said earlier, as Pacific Street was actually the port that went out, right? So he would take them down the wharf right onto a boat and offload them. And because, they'd be out for, say, like 6 hours, plus they got knocked over the head, by the time the poor bastards woke up, they were already out to sea on the Pacific en route to Shanghai. And they were slaves. And the terrible thing was that the captain of the ship would then make the guys earn the price of their heads back. So he had paid, Kelly $100 a head to get these slaves, if you will. And then he would charge the poor guys, say, well, you owe me because I bought you for $100. And this vicious cycle went on and on and on. Old San Francisco was a gnarly place back then.
They're so lucky Yelp didn't exist. Can you imagine that Yelp review? You went to a bar, woke up on a slave ship.
I owned a business in this town for 8.5 years, and I stopped reading Yelp right after we opened. I never engaged. I never did anything. And yet Yelp hired me to do their cocktails for their 10-year anniversary party. So, my advice to everyone with Yelp, and I God bless Yelp. It's a very valuable resource. But it's kind of like the character in Office Space who stops giving a fuck. Is that Phil? He stops caring.
Yeah.
Right? Once he stops caring, okay, to his boss, everything starts getting better. And that's how my experience with Yelp is. So all you business owners, just stop giving a fuck. and all of a sudden, all those 4- and 5-star reviews will start coming in.
That's awesome. Speaking of, can you tell me a little bit about Cantina? Because you really can't talk about modern San Francisco cocktails. I mean, that bar was such an important part of the evolution of the drink scene.
Past tense.
Here. Yeah, right? Is that weird?
Yeah. I mean, it's still there. It's still there. It's still there.
Lives on.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, we opened up Cantina in spring of 2007. And the vibe was, let's showcase what California was and could be. So similar premise to, say, the history of San Francisco and this book, Drinking the Devil's Acre, is, okay, well, what spirits were historically significant? So I did a lot of brandies from California, and then Latin spirits, so pisco, tequila, mezcal, rums. And then spirits that were, interesting, so artisanal stuff from around the world, but mostly local stuff then. So all the stuff that's being made in California, and look, that's both modern and historic, meaning modern in the sense that it's the beginning of the craft spirits boom, right? But also historic in that, look, back in San Francisco in the 19th century, do you think we had whiskey from Kentucky and Tennessee before there was a railroad and there was just a Pony Express? No. Like, it wasn't coming here. Do you think the guys in Kentucky and Tennessee were getting whiskey out to the Atlantic or sitting it down the Mississippi just to get on a boat in New Orleans to come across the Panama Canal? Or before there was a Panama Canal, do you think it would go all the way around Patagonia, around the Horn? No, it wasn't happening. So any whiskey that we had back in the day was actually produced locally. Same thing, right? So that was my vision for it. I said, let's return this to sort of its holistic roots while also doing it with sort of a fresh perspective, because obviously mezcal and tequila is frankly a modern, late 20th century phenomenon in California. But yet, the guy that really championed tequila in California was someone who doesn't get credit for it. That's Trader Vic. Trader Vic loved tequila and talked a lot about it, had a lot of tequila recipes with it, right? He had his notoriety for rum, but and then he also built Pisco. He's got tons and tons of Pisco recipes and loved going down to Peru. And I thought, well, wait a second. So this has been happening for 60 years in this town. Well, let's call attention to that as well. So actually, there are traditions. So again, that's a San Francisco thing. Tequila and Pisco going back to Vic in the 40s. That was important for me to start to tell those stories. And I learned that just by research. I learned it. I said, okay, you know what? I'm into this. And it's not just me. It's not just some stupid idea out of my head. I think I'm hot. I think I'm coming up with this cool concept. No. I want to look back and honor the great traditions of San Francisco. And so that's where it came from. Our commitment to fresh was strong. And also, at the time, any new cocktail bar that opened up, you had to have a password to get into and all that kind of nonsense. And I always thumbed my nose at that and said, look, I'm going to look like this. And just, I'm going to wear a T-shirt and, be better looking than the guy with the wax mustache and the suspenders. And, we might even charge less. And, while I am stirring your Negroni, you asshole, I'm going to have NWA, on the system, and I'm going to be dancing behind the bar. And we did that for years. And because it's okay to, to have a damn good time. And also, it doesn't mean that you can't make amazing cocktails. You can. So we never really took ourselves too seriously. And hope that the work was good and hope that people had a good time.
Well, the first time you and I met was like 8 years ago. I was working with Mutineer Magazine, and we put our whole staff in an RV and went down the West Coast doing photo shoots. And we were looking for a location in San Francisco, and we were talking to folks, and everyone was telling us, you got to go shoot at Cantina. You got to go shoot at Cantina. So we went to Cantina and did like 2 or 3 shoots in the bar. It's such a cool space. And it's just one of those places that has had such an important role in the cocktail culture here.
Thank you, man. That RV was unique, wasn't it?
It was.
Whatever happened to it?
It was a rental. I mean, I had my own that I started with.
Who rents an RV?
I did. It was cheaper, and we just loaded it with all of our samples, all of our press samples, and put the whole staff in there, which was a bunch of 25-year-old guys.
Yeah. And
you can imagine how that went.
Kind of smelly. You're like the merry pranksters, man.
It was a good time. It was a very good time.
How long did you have that? How long was that trip?
That trip was like 10 days. We went from Seattle all the way down the West Coast, and then we went to Arizona. We interviewed Maynard at his whole wine thing in Arizona, and went back up through Vegas and did the whole thing, and somehow survived. Time flies.
How about that?
Yeah.
How about that?
We curiously didn't interview you that day, though. We didn't do a photo shoot with you. We did Charlotte. And we did this woman, Courtney Cochran, who's a wine personality, but we didn't photograph you. But you got your own feature later. So it all worked out.
Totally.
Exactly. In your opinion, as of today, present moment, San Francisco cocktail scene, what's happening? What's your perspective on it?
I don't know. Look, it's so badass. It's so great, but I'm also... It's like the end of a season, for me. I spent years sort of building up and championing this culture, right? So, I co-founded San Francisco Cocktail Week because I was championing this culture and saying, hey, world, look at San Francisco. Well, that lasted for a number of years, and then I was in business, and then I write this book, book comes out, I've done a lot of talking about this, but I haven't actually I haven't gone out lately because I haven't had the time, right? I've also got a young daughter now, and I actually live outside the city limits now. So my ability to go out, and frankly consume and check in is a lot less. I have been visiting some good spots lately, although I'm drawing a blank. Where did I go that was great? Oh, I just went to Arguello.
Yeah?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's the restaurant, and again, it fits in here. It's situated, it's built right as an annex off the oldest building in San Francisco in the Presidio. And Enrique Sanchez is over there doing.
Guy's such a stud.
Dude, his
So
work
cool.
is killer. He made me this nonsensical drink with Siete Legos tequila, right, which I love. Some sort of homemade pineapple spiced cinnamon water with chiles and like a couple globs of yogurt and maybe a little bit of lime or something. And it was gnarly and amazing and refreshing and had mouthfeel. It was like malolactic, but it also had acid. It was also kind of oxidative because how we cooked the pineapple water. And it had just like at a million notes. And I thought, yes. And that's what I love to discover is it was my first time going in to Arguello is like, oh, okay, San Francisco is still offering stories. And it was a very concise trim menu and a very casual atmosphere. And it was connected to history, but also connected to bright flavors. He made up his own stuff, right? It was a house-made ingredient, but with a Latin spirit, okay? California, having come out of both Spain and Mexico. And then he did something sort of, forward and avant-garde by using this goofy Greek yogurt or whatever it was, in it. And I thought, man, this is it's kind of like a boozy lassie, right, if you will. And I thought, man, this is fantastic. So that's just fun for me to see that San Francisco is San Francisco, in that regard. And that it was just a perfect quintessential San Francisco experience to sit with Enrique at his bar at Arguello. So.
And the food's really good there, too.
Oh, of course.
It's such a weird location. It's like you wouldn't expect it to be there.
It's out there at the end of the world.
Yeah.
But it's so worth going because, again, the history. So I'm actually doing an event there for the book. God, it's in May. I think it's the second Thursday in May. So if you want to come, man, do come. But, yeah, I'm going to be over there with the Presidio called Presidio Talks, and that's on May 12th. And I get to deliver this lecture on the history. What am I going to do on the history of booze and cocktails in San Francisco? And then Enrique is going to be slinging a drink in the first oldest building in San Francisco.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Absolutely.
And you consult now, right? For bar programs and stuff.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a while.
But so, I mean, you're not working
that good at it.
But you're not working behind the bar every night. But as a bartender and as someone as a part of this culture, what really inspires you about where the culture's at, where it's going, and specifically the mixing of drinks?
You could take that in a lot of different ways, Alan. I would say that I don't even look at that. I listen to owners' needs and wants.
Yep.
So I say, what do you want? What do you want the culture of this room, this building to be like? Show me your food menu. Fine. Talk to me about everything that you want and hope and think that your demographic is going to be, and then I'm going to find the overlapping space. And that's what I do. So currently helping out a friend open up a couple of restaurants. One is Pete's on Green, and then we're opening up Pisto's Tequila Lounge over on Lombard. And, I know something about opening up a tequila-driven bar. But in no way am I all going to repeat the same concept that I've done before because the owner has a different vision, but also the demographic is going to be different. So that's what's important to me is that, listen, if I'm in the Mission, I can do a lot of cutesy hipster work. It's avant-garde, and the whole culture is avant-garde. The fashion is avant-garde. The music is avant-garde, But if I'm downtown in the financial district, I need to have a different perspective put upon it. So for instance, you're talking about Enrique's, drink that we just talked about, Arguello. It's all culinary there, right? So it's multiple ingredients. It's flavor driven. How he writes the menu is very sparing, and that's in line with the concept. All of the drinks also have Spanish names, or there's ingredients listed in Spanish upon it, right? So it's a holistic thing. That to me is the most important because it goes back to our vision. What you and I often talk about is collaboration. So I listen and think, and I survey the accounts around me, And I hope that by that I'm doing honor, to the ownership and frankly to the patrons who are yet to come in, because I'm thinking about them. I want to deliver a great time to them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never trying to educate. I don't think I need to. Even at Cantina, we are turning people on to new spirits and drinks and flavors constantly, but that's not why I do it. I'm not trying to tell people what something is or that they should drink anything in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That's not it. To me, this is casual. Before Cantina opened, I had 200 of those bottles in my living room. So when you're coming over to my house and hanging out with me, we were doing the same damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I, in a sense, was offering the same type of conversation, and I'd make you a drink, and I was offering the same type of conversations in this public space that had been happening in my home for years and years and years. And I decorated the stuff that came out of my house. It's a very personal experience, And so as a consultant, I like to bring some of that personal chutzpah, but I think that if you're going to lead a beverage program, you have to be a good listener and a good collaborator. And I think that's the most important thing now. So.
And perhaps the most important question of this entire interview.
6 feet tall, always this handsome.
How do they buy the book?
Oh, okay. That's what? That wasn't the question I was
Don't
expecting.
mess this up. You only got one shot at this.
Hold on. You buy Drinking the Devil's Acre wherever great books are sold.
Yeah.
If you're in the USA, hopefully it's not too hard, and you can go to your neighborhood bookstore. There's also the interweb, Barnes and Noble, indie books, Amazon. My editor the other day, told me that the book has been shipped to Israel, Turkey, France, England, a bunch of countries, even Australia. So if you're going to all those countries this year, just look for it, and hopefully you'll be able to find it.
Is it translated?
I mean, they had to translate it from how I wrote it into English because it was so much jibber jabby. I don't know.
You wrote it in Teletubby?
Yeah, right. Is it? I don't know. I don't think. I mean, do boozy books get translated?
I don't know. You're supposed to know this.
I would think it could work in the old Espanol, because you've got so many Latin countries that are rocking drinks right now in Europe and throughout Latin America. I would think that a printing, and look, they all fetishize San Francisco. They all think that we're the most creative badass people out there, and so why not? Maybe it might actually sell a few copies in Buenos Aires, Mexico City, Lima.
It would be so cool if it got translated into Spanish, because look at service culture. So much of it is rooted in Spanish, and so many of those folks have aspirations to, get behind the bar and take their career further. Mm-hmm. Such an opportunity. When I used to be a sommelier, I used to do wine classes for all of our Spanish, service staff, and I have a translator there. It wasn't very efficient, but it was so, empowering for them to have access.
Yeah, that's a great point. What would the title be?
I don't speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Tomando en el cuarto de diablo.
It'd have to be an audiobook, I guess.
Yeah, could I? And I, that's actually what I would love to do. I want to do the audiobook for this damn thing.
Yeah.
2 ounces tequila. Yeah. 1 ounce agave nectar.
Is there an audio version? Because they usually let the authors read it.
Right,
you should do it just to do it.
I need to get in touch with the editor and say, hey, we need to get.
That project would probably be super fun for the first 2 hours, and then it would just be the bane of your existence.
Because just reading recipes would be terrible.
Yeah, it'd be pretty bad.
I don't think that they could keep me under control. I think I would get bored and leave or start doing different voices or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess already happened on this.
Sure.
Well,
swearing. Fucking it all up,
You have expanded the boundaries. So now when someone else goes to that place, you already pioneered it for them.
Sure.
Really?
That's been my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Testing the boundaries?
Yeah, I remember, previous to my full-time employment in the booze game when I was an actor, I remember I was doing shows up at Theater Schmieder in Seattle, and they created the Duggan rule. So, in the lobby, beers were served before intermission and after the show, right? Mm-hmm. And the actors could actually, have a drink after the show in the lobby, like crack a beer and hang out, in your sweaty makeup and such. Well, I died during this play. Like, I died in Act 1. So I would just go out at intermission and start cracking them, and then I'd be in the green room boozing it up. And I don't know. I mean, somebody was offended, or I don't think I got too hammered, but they ended up, for the next production, they ended up making the Duggan rule, which is, yes, the play does actually, the curtain has to fall before Duggan or anybody else can start drinking.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is it
story
still
of my
stand?
life?
They still have it?
I don't know. It's been 15 years or so. So I'm sure it's in print somewhere. Yeah, like on the wall with all the rest of their
I wouldn't doubt
commandments. Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, there you have it, folks. Buy the book on Amazon. I bought it myself. My copy's autographed, which means it's probably worth way more.
At least $1.
At least $1 more.
Yep.
And check it out. And thank you for taking the time. And
Thank you.
I expect that you will be a familiar face on this esteemed broadcast here. So we look forward to many more stories to come in the future.
I enjoyed taking a steam with you, Alan.
There we go. Godspeed.
Thanks, everybody.
Let's do it.